Hello and welcome back to another video on Subway Builder. We're here in Philadelphia where we have 3 lines going back and forth. We can see we're just coming up at the end of day 50, and between videos I've saved up just under $1 billion to hopefully get us through the projects we have planned for today. And so a few things quick. The game has been updated between the last video and this one, so you might notice the colors of the map is a little bit different and hopefully a little bit easier to see, as there is now custom map colors that we can add. So I tried to put together a composition of colors that's a bit easier to read and not quite as dark as the dark mode, especially as the light mode was way too bright. I still like the overall feel of the dark mode, but we used it to brighten up some things and add a bit more contrast, as you can see, especially in the buildings and the parks. Those are a little bit easier to see, as well as the roads. We made those a little bit easier to see as well. So let me know what you guys think, if there's anything you guys want me to change the color of so that you can see better. And on top of that, there has been a couple other changes, such as the station naming logic. So we should get less of these stations that are just labeled Broad Street. I believe it now paths to the closest cross street, which you can also see here. A new thing is street names. So even if this does get messed up, we can come in and rename the station ourselves, and we can use the accurate street even if we don't know where we are in the city. And so the first 2 videos have been doing really well, and all of your feedback is very much appreciated. One thing that a lot of you guys have mentioned is it seems that the game has not registered a few of the stations throughout some of our lines. So if we take a look here, it looks like we did miss this stop on our A line. So we'll add that in and confirm the changes. And then I believe there was another stop on our C line that you guys mentioned. Right here, this station didn't get clicked, so we'll add that one in as well. And everything looks good here. We'll confirm those changes, and then we'll also just check in on our B line and make sure we didn't miss anything there. This one looks okay, so all good on that line. Anyway, back into what we're going to get into in this video. I think what our goal is we're going to expand our A and B stations out a few stations, maybe even our C line if we end up having time. But one of our main things is, once we expand our A and B line, we're going to look into adding some express lines on top of those. Now that's part of the reason why we've saved up close to $1 billion in cash for this project, because essentially, unfortunately, what we're going to have to do is figure out which stations we want to be our express stations, and then we're going to have to demolish them and rebuild them as quad track stations. And then we're also going to have to add a whole bunch of tracks for those express lines, because you don't want your express trains running on the same tracks as your local trains, because otherwise they'll just get held up behind the local trains anyway, and it sort of defeats the purpose of an express line. And so I think the way we're going to do this in order of importance is we're going to expand our A and B lines a few stations. We're going to try to get our A line all the way down into this area, and I believe we reached a good stopping point up north. I actually think we had one more station we wanted to do up here, so we'll add those extensions on our B line. I believe we wanted to get all the way out to here, and then there's also 1 or 2 more stops I want to put in up in this direction. And then we'll leave our C line for now. I know it heads into New Jersey and reaches a whole bunch of population that we weren't reaching before, but we can extend that another time, as I think we want to focus mainly on getting people into Center City as quickly as possible. And so starting off with expanding our A line, let's take a quick look at our demand stats. And as you can see here, there's really not anyone living down here. There's a decent population node here and maybe a little bit here, but there is, however, a decent amount of workers We can see down here there are some reasonably sized bubbles here, and then of course where all the stadiums are, those have some good sized bubbles as well. So these aren't going to be our most popular stations, but they are going to be vital in terms of getting people to these jobs down here. Now if we wanted to analyze this a little bit more, we can take a look at the individual nodes themselves and see where these people are coming from. For instance, this one has a lot of people coming in from West Philadelphia. And then we can maybe take a look at what this is. And there's actually a decent amount of people coming a few blocks away, so we're probably not going to be able to get that one. But there is a node here that's a reasonable size, and it looks like even here, if we can extend this station, we'll probably be able to get most of these people to take our subway system to this work area. And so I think the way things shake up then is we'll come in and we'll build our stations. And so thinking about our express line as we build these stations, I think we're going to have one of these be a quad station and one be a parallel station. However, I think both of these stations are going to accommodate our express line, mostly being, I think, the express line should cover the full extent of your line, so it should go from end to end, in my opinion. So this one will obviously be a destination. However, because it's the end of the line, it can be a parallel track station as it won't interfere with the local trains running through it. However, I do think our station that's going to be right here at the stadiums should be a quad track station. Now, thinking about this a little bit deeper, we don't necessarily need a quad track station for all of our express stops. We can always just pull a track out and bypass a station and have the lines work that way. But especially once we start getting a lot of trains running on this line and we have a frequency closer to like 3 or 4 minutes, we might risk clogging some of these stations as we have a lot of trains coming in and out. So I actually think we're not going to replace a lot of these with quad track stations. I think we're going to bypass these with tracks, and then later on, once we're doing much better, we can upgrade our stations to quad tracks. But while we're building these new ones, we'll have that in mind. And so we'll build this station right here as a quad track station. And then, as we mentioned before, this one down here will just be a simple parallel track station. And so then we'll just bring these together with tracks. So that works. And then I think we have to actually build this one down just because of how narrow it gets in some areas. But that should work. We'll add a crossover. And then on the north end of our line, I believe we wanted a station all the way at the end up here. So we'll throw one in just like that. And then we should be able to easily connect this to our next closest station. So already we're going to be burning through almost half of our money at 500 million. But I do think these are some pretty good upgrades for our A line. We'll bring those in, edit the route, and then we can add all these stations, and we'll make sure to get them all this time. All right, and so with all 31 stops added, we can confirm. And I think we also will need to buy some more trains. We'll buy 10 more cars. We'll add another train for high demand, another one for medium demand, and another one for low demand. And I think we'll stick with that for now. Especially as once we add our express service, we won't need quite as high of a frequency on our local line. And so then again, looking at our B line, we wanted to extend this one a bit further. So we'll add a station right at the end here. And I believe we need to bring this down just far enough to get under the building that's already here. So we can throw that there. We will need to build the tracks to connect these. And then over on this end, if we pull up our demand stats, there's a good amount of people in this area that we can still get to. Now, I think we're only going to add one station for now, but there's certainly potential to add another station in here, and maybe even farther up into this area, all the way here, up in this area. But I'm not sure how far I want this B line to go. I don't want this to be some ridiculously long line that stretches the whole span of the Philadelphia region. Although that wouldn't be a bad thing, I do think that there might be better ways to do that. And so I think this intersection seems like a good spot to add one. We'll have to actually bring up our station elevation, as we don't need it to be that low. We'll get that one in. And now this is going to be a little bit tricky, bringing these tracks around to follow the street and not demolish a huge amount of buildings. We'll just have to be a bit careful about how we do this. And just like that, we can extend this line for another 400 million. We will build that, and quickly we've burned through a good portion of our money. But now what we can do is we can add these stations to our line, and we'll wait to confirm that all of our stations are in there. We will confirm that, and then I think again, actually the frequency on this line doesn't look too terrible at the moment. So I think we'll leave it how it is. If we start getting a bunch of warnings, we might add some more trains, but looking at the frequency numbers now, it seems like it's almost matching what our A line is currently at. Alright, and so with our new extensions, we've let this run for about a day. You can see the jump in profit we were able to get from that. So it looks like that's added about another $15 million a day to our operational profit. So that's really good to see. You can see that spike here in our overall revenue chart. Another new thing is the ability to have bonds, which are essentially loans. I don't think we're ever going to use these. We're not too tight on money, and none of these seem too interesting at the moment to take, so we're not going to touch those, but those could certainly be handy to get off to a good start if needed. So I think we're going to try to implement an express line now, and I think the best way to do this is to probably test out what we want to do before we actually do it, because I did just think of a potential issue. Since we can't necessarily direct trains where we want them to go, they might automatically pathfind through the station instead of taking the tracks that would bypass the station. So we're going to have to give this a little bit of a test drive. We'll test it out here with these 3 stations, and if this works, we'll implement it across the whole line, and everything will be good there. But if not, we unfortunately might have to come through and add a quad station at every one of our express stations. And so the simplest way to do this is to just grab a single track, and we'll just have it come off of the station here, or off of the tracks. It will bypass the station. Looks like we can get as close as we want. And then we just have to have it connect back here. And then we do the same thing on this side. We'll avoid all the buildings so we don't accidentally delete anything. And then we can have that connect back in after the station. And so we'll just add a new line on top of our A line. Right now it's called 6, but we'll call it AX for express. We'll edit the route. And if we just click this station and then this station, yeah, unfortunately it doesn't do what we thought it would. Actually, we didn't even build these blueprints. We'll build these blueprints, and now we'll try this. So we'll add this station, and add this one. And so it does look like it actually routes the correct way. I actually wasn't expecting it to do this, but that is great news that this does work. So I think now all we have to do is we'll cancel this. We don't need this running at the moment. I think we're going to make this, first of all, look a lot cleaner. and neater at each station. And then we'll also have to come through and determine which stations we want to be our express stations as well. Alright, so really determining what our express stations are going to be is largely going to depend on the demand of the area, and I think also our station ridership numbers, as that will also help inform us as to what our most popular stations are and where people are most likely wanting to go. And so this seems to line up somewhat decently with what I was thinking for our A line. Obviously this end here is going to be one. Let's just come in and pin our demand stats so that those are always showing. And then of course our next station here has a decent number of people, so I think this one makes sense to be an express station. Now the issue comes is, do we head straight to this area, which is Temple University, or do we make a stop here and we'll just do pretty much every other station? There does seem to be a decent sized node here. I'm not sure if that's workers or residential. It seems like the demand stuff is a little bit broken, so we might have to close out and bring this back up. So it does look like there's a decent sized work node there. So maybe we do actually do every other. And then continuing on, I think we stop here at our Spring Garden station, and then another at City Hall. And then I think we come from City Hall to this station, then to this station and this one. Now I know these two kind of break our rule and they're not very heavily used, but I do think if we provide an express service to these, it might bring a bit more people to using these stations since they won't have to waste so much time stopping everywhere else. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through and build our tracks bypassing each one of our stations that we mentioned before. Hopefully we can keep this at a reasonable cost, as it is only tracks and not stations that we're building, but we'll just have to see what it comes out to, and we'll be back once that's all set up and ready to go. Alright, to add all the track bypassing our local stations will be just under 500 million, so that's not too terrible. You can see we had to do some weird things near City Hall just due to the elevation changes and the way the track curves, but I think it all should work out in the end. We tried to keep everything as fast as possible, and so now when we come in here, we should be able to grab our A express line, edit the route, and then we just need to add all of our express stations now. Alright, so now I've added all of our express stations. Let's go through and make sure the path is correct. So it looks like it bypasses this one correctly. It stops there, it passes these, it stops at City Hall. This station it passes. Then looks like here we start to get some issues. It wants to go through Girard Station instead of going around. So maybe we just have to build. I'm not too sure what we have to do to get that correct, but I think we can build the line, and then if we... Actually, I'm not sure if we build the line if we can change these tracks around. But anyway, let's just find all of our problem areas. Looks like it happens again here at Lehigh Ave, so we might have to make this just a little bit quicker. And it looks like it's just those two stations then that we're having problems with. And so I'm going to come through and try to mess around with the tracks a little bit. And once we get that fixed and figured out, we should be back and seeing our express trains going through. Alright, a few small minor adjustments later, it looks like all of our stations are good. Let's just zoom out and make sure everything is set correctly. It looks like our express line is hitting everything we want to, so we'll confirm those changes. And now, as we're first buying a few extra cars. As we're thinking about this, we have to remember this is only an express line. It's not representative of all the people moving on this line. So I think during high demand, if we have an express train come through every 15 minutes, that's not too crazy or out of the ordinary. You would expect the local to come a lot more often than an express train. So I think 15 minutes on high is okay. And then for medium demand, I could go either 1 or 2. It's just 42 minutes in medium demand for an express train feels a little bit long to wait for me. So I think for medium demand, we'll just go with 2. And then low demand, we're not going to have any express trains. I think the demand is low enough that it wouldn't really warrant anything like that, especially when it would really only save you 5 to 10, maybe 15 minutes at most on a commute. So we'll leave that for now, and we should be able to let this run. And you can see now at all these stations where our express train stops, you can see the A line and the A Express stops at those. And so we'll just keep an eye on our warnings here and make sure we're not getting any weird blockages at some of our stations with our express trains running into our local trains, which shouldn't really happen, and if it does, it shouldn't happen that often. But we will keep an eye on that as we continue to let things run. Alright, so now that it is in the peak morning rush hour, let's see if we can maybe find one of our express trains and follow it around just to make sure it's doing what we want. And so it looks like here's an express train that just came through and is stopping at City Hall now. And it's stopping at every other station instead. So that is exactly what we want to see from it. Let's see if we can find another one. Maybe there's one farther up this way. I don't think there is. But let's just follow this express train for a little bit and make sure we're not getting any hiccups with running into any of our locals or anything crazy like that. And so now here's an express train that was dealing with a problem I was hoping we wouldn't run into. As we followed it along, we can see it gets stuck behind this local train at this station, which isn't too big of a deal, but if we keep an eye on them, this train leaves this station before our express train can pass it. So in the reality of things, this express train is really only running just as fast as this local train. And so it's a little bit unfortunate that this is happening. I'm not sure how we can fix it with our current configuration unless we skip multiple stations instead of just one and doing every other type of situation. Now, there is an instance near City Hall which allows these trains to pass each other, which is coming up right here. So we can keep an eye on it as the local stops, the express is behind it. We can see the local train stops, and then the express train is able to pass it as it's stopping here at Washington Avenue. And so that does allow our express train to get past. Unfortunately, that's only one spot that it can do that. So I don't think we're going to stick with this configuration for too long. I think the sooner we can switch to a quad track type system, the better. But I think the simple answer is that we just don't have the money to make that switch just yet. And so I'll keep an eye on this. I will keep track of our route ridership, and if this line isn't putting up any sort of decent numbers, we might just scrap it until we can do a quad track configuration for our express lines. So that's just something to keep an eye out for, but it does look like it's starting to pull in a decent amount of people. It's already pulling in half as many people as our C line, and I don't think it's even been 24 hours, so this number is going to continue to go up. And so I think just to end the video off, let's take a quick analysis of our stations, our routes, and how everything's doing. So you're starting to see some of our bubbles getting a little bit bigger where our express trains stop. And I think that's really what we sort of expected to see. We see a little bit of a bump here, with this one being at 9K and the other two at 8K. Down here, it doesn't look like these numbers have gotten any better, but it has only been a little less than a full day, so those numbers might not be fully adjusted yet. Our C line is doing okay. It looks like this station is doing a bit better now that we've fixed our previous routing issues. I'm sure if we take a look at transfers, that number, I don't know what it was before, but it does seem to be in our top 3 of stations for transfers, so I'll take that as a bonus. It looks like our news station for line B is doing pretty well out here. It's pulling in a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people overall that we can pull from in this area, so we're gonna have to start getting into branching lines soon so that we can sort of cover all of this, as well as up here in Northeast Philadelphia. If we look at this station ridership, we're also pulling in a decent amount of people at this end station. So I think there's a lot of promise for the B line. I think there's many opportunities we can use to have branching lines to cover more population. We can of course continue extending deeper into New Jersey, and while it's not as populated as North Philadelphia or West Philadelphia, there is still a good amount of people to cover out here. And even though that this is primarily a subway simulation, I do think if we can start to maybe mimic some of the regional rail routes that SEPTA currently has in the Philadelphia area, those would also provide a good groundwork for covering some of these other population centers. So maybe that's something we can do with light rail or light metro, since those lines might not be as heavily used, since those reach some of these more sparsely populated sections of the Philadelphia region. But overall, I think we're doing quite well, and we'll just have to save up even more money before the next video to implement some of these larger projects. And so to wrap off this video, looking at our route ridership, it looks like we're actually competing with our own A line. So even though our express line is increasing in numbers, we're actually decreasing our A line ridership, which in the end it's all the same line. So we could just add these and it shouldn't be too different. However, I think where we do see it is in our revenue graph. So we obviously need to give it a bit more time to get a bit more accurate analysis on this, but I think initial reactions, we're losing a little bit of money compared to what we were making before. So maybe until we can have a proper quad track express system, we can pull back on demand on this and have this run 2 trains in high demand and maybe 1 train in medium demand, just so we're not competing quite as much and it's not as expensive to run that line, especially given that it's running about the same frequency as the local. But again, keep giving me your ideas. I'm all open for really anything. Line naming ideas, station names, if you guys know of any special places near these stations that you would prefer to have them named, I'd be more than happy to include that, considering most of these are just street names, which, although is probably pretty standard, it's cool to have these stations such as City Hall and Independence Mall, some of these more landmark destination stations. So if you guys have any names like that, let me know in the comments below, as well as any lines you guys want me to explore. I know getting an airport line in is going to happen pretty soon. I'm not going to say it's going to happen in the next video, but I think that is something we're going to look into here in the near future. But if there's any other sort of unique or interesting lines you guys want me to explore or think about putting in here, let me know. But I think with that, that's where we're going to end this video off today. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or feedback, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.